We want to deep dive today on build to sell. When you're building your bubble app to sell, I don't know that many people go into building with this mentality. And I don't know that I ever have, to be honest. I don't know that I really thought about selling the entire company. My mind is always on how am I going to make money off of this app idea that I'm building, but never really like price or thinking about like, oh, what's my exit strategy here?
Right.
And I think like you kind of said last week, Deal, that you were like everyone should be doing that. Like everyone, you should always be thinking about building to sell, even if you're not selling. So like, why do you think that?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's my own personal philosophy. I don't think everybody, everybody's got their own ways of doing things, but just going through the atomic fusion cell, it just kind of shed a lot of light on different ways to build, to be prepared to offload projects. You had mentioned, you had just made a comment, you said to build to sell, but you had mentioned company, right? You had said build to sell a company. I don't necessarily think, and this is my opinion, that you have to formulate an entire company around a project to sell it, right?
That's yeah. I mean, I think it's an assumption that people make, but we haven't really discussed why is that. Why does that always need to be true, right?
Yeah.
Like people think I'm going to build a product, and that's going to turn into a company, and I'm going to make a lot of money or sell it. But you're right. There's no reason to assume that this project needs to turn into a company.
It doesn't. It doesn't. And I was under that misconception too, because this is kind of my first rodeo with atomic fusion. And when I was going through that whole sell process, or when I was about to sell, I started looking at, okay, well, I need to go formulate like an LLC. I need to have this legit. I need to have a business bank account. I need to have, tax ID number. I need to have all this stuff. And you just don't. You don't have to have any of that. So I actually reached out to, I think I talked to Andrew at MicroAquire a little bit, and I pinged Steven over at Tiny Acquisitions. And I was like, hey, man, I was just asking, is your platform more for like selling projects, or is it more for selling like full on like startup companies, like companies? And he was like, well, we're more like just projects, that are for sale. So I was like, well, let me just get on MicroAquire and start the listing process. So once I started doing that, there was nothing in there that says, hey, what's your business? I mean, you can list your business name and stuff like that, but nothing was required. So, this was probably going on about a month before I fully was like, all right, I'm going to sell this thing. I was just kind of dabbling and seeing what the landscape was to get listed on MicroAquire, make it official, and sell it and hand it off. Well, lo and behold, you can take your project that you built for a week and go list on MicroAquire. You don't have to be a full-born entity. Now, I do structure around myself. Like I have a DBA and I operate as just a sole proprietor. And all my income that comes from anything just passes through to my personal tax bracket, right? My personal tax, income tax. So I am formulating for my next stuff. I am probably going to be formulating more of a parent brand LLC to operate under, but that's just for tax purposes and stuff like that. So to answer any questions, you don't have to be a legal business. You yourself are a legal entity, so you can sell any project you want, and just make it known to the buyer. Like most of my inquiries were like, hey, is this an LLC? Am I acquiring a company, or I'm just buying a project? And I was like, hey man, you're just buying a project. And both parties a lot of times are like, sweet, because it's way easier to just go the assets. You don't have to transfer LLC crap and legal entity stuff.
So in this case, incorporating and making an LLC actually complicates the process of the sale, because it's like, well, I'm not taking over your company. We don't have to change any legal documents. You're just buying my idea.
That's right. That's right. It was easier for me. Now I don't want to steer anybody in the wrong direction, because Atomic Fusion was still very small. If it was going to start growing into, a $250,000 a year, type revenue generating business, then I would have probably went and formulated an LLC, ensured that I had the right, policies behind that, the right legal protection behind any of that, and things like that. But anybody selling digital products, particularly like a web app or something, there's not a lot of like legality, like risk issues. Like there may be something like, John, I'm sure you work on some projects. Matter of fact, we were working on one together that if you were to go in and accidentally do an update and delete a ton of data or something and you couldn't recover it, then you're subject to probably some sort of a lawsuit, I bet. So
Yeah.
you want to be very cautious of that stuff. But if it's just a client-facing application like Atomic Fusion, I had no reason to go formulate an LLC, and I was very close to doing that for it. But when I went to sell, I was so happy that I didn't, because it made handing off like that much easier.
When you are, so what are the requirements on like MicroAquire and what is Stevens? Tiny acquisitions?
Tiny
Tiny
acquisitions, yeah.
acquisitions. What are the requirements to list there?
Yeah, I mean, there really aren't much. I mean, it's like on MicroAquire, I think it's just list, you're listing what the app is. You're giving short descriptions. You can attach some of your analytics, some very generic stuff to it. They want to know what your MRR is, your ARR. There's stuff on there that basically people have like zero revenue and they're still selling it. So it's just a form-based listing site. That's all MicroAquire is. I mean, it's a great platform. Don't get me wrong. And what Andrew did over there is fantastic, and how he marketed it. But it's pretty simplistic, actually. If you haven't been through it, it's not like some people might be like. I had a bunch of people go, "Hey, what was the requisites for listing on there?" I'm basically like, dude, there's like none. Like, if you want to sell your thing, put it on there and sell it. The prerequisite is, if you're going to sell something, make sure it's probably something somebody's going to want to buy, or you're just going to waste your time listing. You won't get any inquiries or anything like that. So it's really straightforward. It was super easy. And I was nervous going into it, because I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like qualify to do this, or, it was like, this is just a little, little Chrome extension project that I got going on. But that's not the case. If you got something that you think is generating revenue or has potential and you want to sell it, try it, throw it up there, see what happens. If you don't get anything, tear it down, just
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's any downside to listing it on there, right?
there's no cost. There's no cost for you to list your project on there. On MicroAquire, the way MicroAquire predominantly generates revenue is by the buyer. So if you're looking to buy on MicroAquire, I think it's like $400 a year, something like that. That's how you're able to see who the owner of the project is and be able to contact them and things like that. Until you do that, all you can do is browse.
Oh, okay. So that's how they make their money.
Yeah, they kind of reverse engineered it. They, instead of saying, "Oh, you're going to pay to list," no, you're going to pay to actually see who listed. And I think that's how Steven does it at Tiny Acquisition does it, and I think that's how Microns does it. It's a pretty common path now for those listing sites.
As far as like the build goes, would you say like, because you didn't go in, well, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't assume that, right? Like you went in, you didn't necessarily know that you were going to sell.
I didn't.
You didn't, right? So like, would you have done anything differently knowing that you were building it to sell?
100%. 100%. And I think this is why we wanted to do this session. This gets into that specifics of why we. So when I started Atomic Fusion, my whole thing was like, I got it. I've validated this. People need some help, being able to quickly, rapidly design stuff in Bubble. Let's make it super easy. I'm going to build this, and I'm going to scale it, and I'm going to get that monthly reoccurring revenue in, and I'm going to just build this thing up to $1 million company, whatever, right? That's the dream, right? Let's just build this thing up. Well, when you go into it with that thought process, you're putting blinders on of how to build, right? How to build this product that is what I like to say is modular, where you can very easily take this project and go, hey, potential buyer A or potential buyer B, I no longer want to do this. I'm tired of it. Here you go. You buy it from me and you take it. And what happened was, when I got to the point that I wanted to sell Atomic Fusion, I had not built in a way that made that process as easy as I liked. I was partially there. I did some things kind of by accident right and properly to be able to facilitate the build to sell methodology that I'm a big believer in.
Like what?
Yeah. So, and Steven on his blog, Tiny Acquisitions, for those of you that are listening, go read his article on this, but I'll just summarize it and talk about it a little bit. Is when you go into a project, if you're not going to, and this is my opinion only, if you don't believe you're going to sell, you're not even thinking about selling, this is going to be your baby, you still need to build the product in a way to sell. And what I mean by that is a lot of products, let's use Bubble as an example, since a lot of listeners here are bubblers, me and you are bubblers. When you're building that product, when I say build to sell, I'm not talking about how you build the actual application. I'm talking how you build the ecosystem around the application. So what I mean by that is when, let's say I've got a Bubble app and I'm building and I'm jamming and I've got it and I'm going to launch it. Okay, well, what did you use to facilitate building that Bubble app? And I call these orbital apps. I put this out on Twitter and everybody was clowning me, but I call this orbital software. And this is all the software that you use that surrounds your main application in Bubble. So MailerLite for your mailing list, MailChimp if you use MailChimp, your Google Analytics or Plausible Analytics, your Stripe account, your oh my gosh, I don't know. There's probably like 6 or 7 different apps. I use Brandbird for some marketing stuff. There's all these kind of applications that I use, and it's a very simple thing. What you need to do is create those things that are not associated to you as an individual. So and Stephen writes this in his blog, you go create a MailerLite account. Make sure that you create that under the Atomic Fusion brand email account. Don't tie that to Neil Pierce at whatever, right? Do it to hello@atomicfusion.io. When you go and create your Stripe account, I messed up here. I used my personal Stripe account that I used to use for my freelance to bring in the revenue for Atomic Fusion. Well, when it came time to go hand off Atomic Fusion to Ranjit, I basically had to give him my personal Stripe account. And then we ran into issues because like India had something with his bank account, trying to wire up to that account. And I had to change all my social security numbers and all my business stuff out of there. I had to detach my business checking account. It's just stuff that piles up and makes the handoff process hard. So now if I go spin up a project, I'm going to create a completely new from scratch Stripe account that's tied to hello@project.com. And I'm putting all the business account stuff with it and all that. So when I get acquired, I just say, oh, here you go, take it, detach my bank account, put your bank account on it, change it to your information, and it's yours, right? So I did that with a handful of my orbital apps like MailerLite and Plausible and stuff. It was sweet because when Ranjit took over, all I had to do is say, we just got on a Zoom together. I go, okay, here we go. We're going to change the password. You're going to log in, and then you're going to change it to the password you want, and then you're going to tie your billing to it. And then I'm out. I'm done. I'm done with that account. That's your account now, right? And most platforms will facilitate that now to where you can easily do that, because you don't want the buyer to lose like all the analytics that you've piled up for the past 6 months or a year. You want that buyer to be able to get that historical data with the company or with the acquisition. So long story short, John, is build to sell from a product standpoint. Don't tie any of this crap to you personally, even if you don't think you're going to sell this thing. Because I bet you, chances are you're going to get 6 months, a year in, and you're going to be generating revenue, and you might run into some burnout and be like, I need to sell this thing. Well, don't put yourself in a corner to where it's very hard to sell it. And by doing that, by tying stuff to you personally, is just a really bad move.
That's very, and I imagine even worse, tying it to another project that you may have worked on in the past, right? Like say you've got a Stripe account. Now you're intermingling 2 different projects, and that must be even more of a nightmare.
Yeah.
So see, that's an interesting perspective that's not obvious, and I'll bet you a lot of people make that mistake, right? It sounds obvious, but it's really not. Like when you're building this stuff, you're trying to do everything as fast as possible. So it's easy to just sign into your personal account. All that shit is set up already. You don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
But this is what it's going to take to get from 10,000 users to 50,000 users. I know what I have control. I know what I need to do, but do I want that? Is that really the way that I want to spend the next 10 years of my life? It's a commitment, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people don't go in. They just go in thinking that they're going to build the biggest company in the world without the thought of building to sell it. And they don't really, take into consideration what'll make it easy if I do want to do this, right? Maybe the idea is just don't block it off. Don't block off the option to sell in the beginning phases, because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said there. I'll add to that a little bit too, is most projects for makers or creators or indie hackers or whatever you want to call us, they're typically stepping stones to something bigger, right? So every time I build something, it's usually a stepping stone, because I've either learned something, not just from building, but I've learned something like from the market. I've learned something. I've found maybe a niche along the way. A lot of people, when they build stuff, they find niches inside of that product. They find small niches inside of that product that they're building that you can spin off to a full solo product. So a lot of projects that get built, they're stepping stones to a bigger idea or a bigger audience, right? So that's kind of how Atomic Fusion started panning out for me. I was like, I feel like I'm on to something maybe bigger than Atomic Fusion now, from what I've learned by marketing and talking to so many people. So let me sell that, make some money, use that money to fund your next gig, right? Just roll that in to help you. And you just constantly are building this mountain of like leverage, right? You may go sell for 20 grand. All right, now you got 20 grand in your account. You pay your taxes, now you're liquid. You take that, you use that to pay your next startup cost for your new Bubble application, your new, Gmail account and stuff like that. And you build that up. Maybe you sell that for 40 grand. And you just, it's stepping stones, man. And that's how I'm approaching stuff right now, is stepping stones to a bigger, I guess, means.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think in the projects that I've worked on, I've always thought that was going to be the end all be all of what, this is just how I'm gonna, spend like the freelancer stuff I was doing. Still am doing to some extent, but I definitely missed the mark on the problem. But yeah, like in that, like there's so much that you wouldn't have otherwise learned, and it opens up your eyes to other things that people are doing wrong. Maybe this isn't the audience that you want to serve, but you kind of realize, oh wow, this whole group of people that's kind of adjacent to this original idea that I had, they're doing this like way wrong. Like there might be some kind of opportunity there instead. And you would have never come to that realization had you not tried the first thing. So it's not like it was a waste of time. It feels like a waste of time because it just feels like you're fucking up and wrong all the time.
It does.
But like it points you kind of in a different, like a little bit of a different direction.
Yeah, it does. And I've seen so many people, like when I first started this journey years ago, is like, fail fast, get out there and try whatever you fail on. You trust me, you learn something. And it's truth. I mean, I've learned something from every little project or idea that I've put out there. So just learn from it, but cognitively be cognizant of what you're doing while you're failing, is what I'll say, and take those wins from that fail and scrap it and move on and build off of that. And you just got to chip away at it. And that's kind of what I've done. And that's what I see others doing. Do you think Steven over at, and I don't want to like put anything out there, but you think Steven over there at Tiny Acquisitions is just thinking Tiny Acquisitions is his last like hurrah and this is his baby? Maybe he is, but I think he's an entrepreneur, and I highly doubt that. I bet you Tiny Acquisitions will be a stepping stone to something else. He had his first project acquired, so I can't remember what that was, but he went from that right to Tiny Acquisitions pretty quickly. So I think, and I don't know why I'm using him as a example, I guess because he's in the acquisition space, but I guarantee he's sitting over there brewing up on something else and leveraging things he's learned from Tiny Acquisitions for either a new venture or to maybe just to scale TA even further.
Just working working with clients in the bubble freelancing space, the big thing that I'm taking away that everyone is doing wrong is the, we talked about this a little bit last week, but the concept of like build first and then find users. So I think just naturally being in this space and doing development work for other people and running the bubble boot camps for people that do have an idea that they want to build is like, we have to stop doing that. We have to realize that these things are intermingled. And I think like even as a development agency, someone who just is contracted to build software, we have to start taking that into consideration. Like, we can't just blindly build. We have to like coach our clients to start engaging with an audience. Otherwise, we're just in this kind of cycle of like feature build for things that never see the light of day. So I'm pivoting at the moment, even with things that I've learned. And this isn't, I don't have a startup. I don't think it's not. It's an agency, I guess, at the best. But I want to do things differently. I want to actually like have my clients earning revenue. I don't want to just be their developer, right?
Yeah, teach them how to earn revenue too at the same time. And I think to that point, John, we got some feedback. I think on Twitter last week, we had a couple people tweet back at us saying, "Hey, the session was good. Not many people are talking about this stuff. They're only talking about how to build stuff." So, look, if you're a hobbyist and you're just wanting to build because you like to build, that's fine. Like, you don't have to like go make money. You don't have to do that. If that's a hobby of yours, do it. But I'd venture to say most of the people building are looking to try to generate revenue somehow, or change their lifestyle, get away from their full-time job, do this full-time, like that. So it's like, I think bringing this stuff to the forefront is good because it not only helps me, but it's helping other people's that I think have the same questions that I did. It's like the unknown. Everybody's scared of the unknown. Well, it's not that scary out there once you go through it once and you're like, oh, that was a joke. Next time I approach this, it's going to be like, it's not going to be a big deal, right? So I think addressing the unknown of the talking to people and generating revenue and getting clients and how to scale that out a little bit needs to be talked about more. So that's why I'm super stoked to come on here as much as you'll have me, because I think it's being kind of, I don't want to say purposely hidden out there. Like, I think there's a lot of people that have done this. A lot of people have been really way more successful than me. I mean, mine's very minor to what a lot of other people are doing out there, but you don't see them talking about it much. It's almost like they're too busy just continually growing their empire, or they're introverts and they don't want, I don't know what it is, but I don't see anything like what we're talking about that often. I think there's maybe a few podcasts and stuff here and there, but not real, real down to earth.
It's always, and even when they do talk about it, it always seems to be in retrospect, right? It's like, oh, when a founder, like say there's a successful founder that sold their company, or they just, they got a lot of users, but they don't, and someone's interviewing them. It's always like one sentence, like, oh yeah, so first we got 1,000 users, right? Like that's it. Like that's all. Like, wait a minute, but there's so much to getting that first 1,000, 10,000, whatever. Like, even though that's small, like there's so much that goes into getting that. How do you think about that?
Right.
And I honestly think that's really what's missing from even the bubble community as a whole, right? Even the ecosystem that we kind of live and operate in on Twitter and the forum and stuff. There's no focus on how to reach your audience. And I feel like people putting that in the category of marketing, right? Like they think that's marketing and that's separate from building,
right.
Which I disagree with. I think that's a fundamental part of building is the audience that you're serving. And we have to pay more attention to that.
Yeah, I agree. They're intertwined. They're very much intertwined. You should be talking to people just in general as much as you're building. I think it makes the build process easier. I love to build a feature, throw it out on Twitter and just say something stupid and let somebody comment back on it or whatever. You get out of every comment, even a thumbs up, you get something out of just doing that. You know what I mean? And yes, there's a point where maybe I get a little annoying, but I'm that guy that finally just said, I don't give a shit if I'm annoying you. If you don't like what I'm putting out, then stop following me. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
So it all comes back to thick skin too, and just growing a pair and putting it out there and going through it. But to what you said about, the one liner where someone is like, yeah, we got to 10,000 users, and then they just kind of move on to the next thing. It's like, well, how did you do that? Because I could sit here all day and tell you how I set up an API call, and here's the body of the JSON, and here's how I set up my post command and my authentication with the API key, and I did it to MailerLite. Like, right? Why can't we talk about how you got that 1,000 or 10,000 users in that same fashion? Right? What steps did you do that? People need to know that crap, and everybody leave that out.
At the same level of detail that you would explain how you connected to a MailerLite API, we should be understanding and talking about the level of detail that you got your first, even your first 10, right? Yep. First 10 users. I think that's the that will add value to people who are building and are struggling to get to to get any attention to their app. There's a lot of us. There's a lot of us that are in that space where we're just struggling to, we have a problem. We thought we nailed it with the first iteration of software, and there's a lukewarm response. There's a lot of people that get that reaction to what they're building.
Right. Yeah, and it's still, to me, it still comes down to you still got to build something people want, But that all comes with the pre-conversation. You can find out in the first 2, 3, 4 weeks, maybe, am I building something that people want? And that's how do you do that? By talking to people. So
yeah, it is. All right, everybody.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. If you're watching this on YouTube, check out twitch.tv/bubblehack. We're going to have more conversations around how people are finding their user base and reaching their audience. All right, later.